So the title of this video should make it pretty self-explanatory. These are 4 players who I think are personally going to break out next season, or simply enough just take that next step in their career and put themselves on as more solidified star players. I've got a couple of lower tier guys, I got a middle tier guy, and I've got one of those guys that we all know and I just think is going to take that next step into stardom. So here we go, alright? First player up on this list is OG Anunoby from the Toronto Raptors.
Were you a big Kobe guy growing up?
Yeah.
What is it that you were able to take from him?
Oh, just like what parts of...
As weird as it may sound, considering their current state and playoff history prior to last season, the Toronto Raptors are the NBA's reigning champions. But their team is very revamped, and well, not really in the best way. Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green are out, and well, Stanley Johnson and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson are in. Not the greatest way to recoup after the best season in franchise history. Last season, the league and Raptors fans were pleasantly surprised by the emergence of power forward Pascal Siakam, who played a monumental role in their championship run. But Siakam is now the franchise player, and well, considering the jump that he just took last season, it's not really fair to expect Siakam to come in and fill the Kawhi shoes in this first season without him, or maybe ever. In comes OG Anunoby. The 23rd pick has already solidified himself as one of the league's best young 3-and-D players, although he was unable to further solidify himself as some sort of household name due to the appendicitis keeping him out of the Raptors championship run. But with Anunoby fully healthy and in line to receive a big boost in minutes, usage, and opportunities, considering the Raptors' relatively weak wing depth, it's not far-fetched in the slightest to think he could have one of those Siakam-esque jumps into stardom. He's built most of his offensive game thus far into his career off of off-ball opportunities as a spot-up shooter, a cutter, and averages just 6.4 points on 46% shooting for his career, which is the reason why he's the first player on this list, because I can far from guarantee you that he's going to become Kawhi in one season. But I can't even count the amount of young players who have went from purely overlooked role players to stars in the early years of their career. So simply enough, if you weren't already, just keep an eye on Anunoby. Next up we have Anfernee Simons from the Portland Trailblazers. Anfernee Simons, who easily has one of the weirdest names in the NBA, may not be a name you've ever heard of, but let me tell you that this guy, he's just got it. Simons is not being heavily looked upon throughout the league by, well, casual NBA fans, but Blazers fans seem to have a hell of a lot of anticipation for Simons' potential breakout year. He's a 6'4", 185-pound guard going to his sophomore NBA season with Portland. Simons didn't have some sort of weird under-the-radar rookie season. He only averaged 4 points in 20 games played, but the impressive sample size displayed by Simons and the role he's coming into this season made me convinced enough to include him as a dark horse candidate for this upcoming season. In Portland's 82nd game of the season with their playoff spot solidified and starters resting, Simons came in and put up 37 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, and only 2 turnovers, leading the Blazers' 6-man rotations to a 5-point win over a very solid Kings team that didn't rest anybody. Now you might still be like, well, Grayson Allen just dropped 40 in Utah's last game of the season on 11 for 30 shooting. Yeah, no. You see, Simons did somehow play all 48 minutes of this game, but he shot 13 for 21 from the field and 7 for 11 from downtown, which are pretty impressive shooting splits, and I think the 48 minutes of NBA game time make those shooting numbers even more impressive. He also went on to have a very solid summer league, putting up 22 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game while shooting 56% from the field and 65% from downtown, which earned him summer league second team honors. Nonetheless, all of this is still just a small sample size, but simply for myself, Simons easily passes the eye test with his game looking both incredibly similar to teammates McCollum and Lillard. He's now the clear-cut lead backup guard in Portland, and he brings something unique to the table as the Blazers usually stagger the minutes of Dame and CJ so that one of them is always on the court, and while I won't say that Simons can just fill either one of their shoes yet, he could relieve a lot of pressure from the two of them with another year of Portland practically completely relying on the scoring of their star duo to propel them into playoff positioning. So just watch out for Simons, because he could propel himself into one of the best bench players in the league as soon as this season, and maybe becomes one of the better guards in the league in the future. Next up on this list is Markelle Fultz of the Orlando Magic. This may or may not be a name that you expected to see here. Markelle Fultz needs really no introduction. We all know where he was picked, the struggle he's been through, league-wide uncertainty with his health, and so on. But what if I told you that Fultz is now on a team that he's not highly covered by the media or heavily pressured to make the playoffs? Not very many people in the world really care if he lives up to his former #1 draft pick hype. He has another year of recovery and progression under his belt, and the only man he has to beat out for Orlando's starting point guard spot is DJ Augustin. Fultz is someone that I personally never really understood all the hatred towards, at least from non-Sixers fans. I'll let Sixers fans slide just because I understand why you'd be pissed off if a guy you drafted first overall couldn't pan out due to injuries within his first 2 years, and you eventually traded him for Jonathan Simmons. But wait, wasn't there just a guy that just dealt with injuries for his first 2 years, became practically forgotten around the league, and eventually came back to shock the whole world? Oh yeah, that guy is Sixers franchise player Joel Embiid. Now, I won't say Fultz will be a Joel Embiid caliber player just yet, but I feel that it is very close-minded to fully judge the rest of his career based off the rough start, especially when he's looked pretty promising at times when he's healthy. He did become the first teenager in league history to ever record a triple-double. He was still able to average 8 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists on a decent 42% from the field prior to getting re-injured last season. And just for me personally, he passed the eye test, and I don't think that should be too shocking considering that he was the #1 overall pick just 2 years ago. He could also slide in perfectly as Orlando has been developing a very lengthy core of guys, with Jonathan Isaac expected to break out this season, and Mo Bamba, who had a disappointing first year but is bound to eventually have an impact in this league. Fultz has always been an enigma, and because of that, it's impossible to fully grasp what he could become at his full potential, or if he's already reached it. He has all the opportunity in the world to emerge as the legitimate starting point guard and franchise point guard this season for the Orlando Magic, but we'll have to wait and see whether or not this long-awaited breakout finally comes this season. Next up on the list, and lastly, is Jayson Tatum from the Boston Celtics. The presence of Tatum on this list may or may not surprise you, but let me explain to you exactly why he deserves a spot on this list, at least in my eyes. Jayson Tatum emerged onto the scene in his rookie campaign after being selected 3rd overall with a very solid top 3 Rookie of the Year vote-getting season and an incredible first postseason, leading Boston to the Eastern Conference Finals despite the absence of Kyrie Irving. Now, what he didn't know at the time was that his impressive 2018 postseason performance would eventually haunt him in a way, as despite Tatum not necessarily having a bad season of some sort in 2018-19, he didn't really capitalize or develop in many or any way. Once Kyrie Irving returned, he never really fulfilled the expectations that his prior postseason run had set up for him. But things are very different now. You'd have to imagine there's some sort of chip on Tatum's shoulder following some league-wide criticism due to the lack of a sophomore jump. And well, Boston goes into the season with a pretty revamped roster. This offseason they lost Kyrie Irving, Al Horford, and Marcus Morris, who combined for just over 40 shots per game last season. And to counter those losses, they signed Kemba Walker, who shot around 20 times per game with Charlotte and will most likely shoot much less on a more talented team, and Enes Kanter, who attempted around 9 shots per game on Portland. Now, I don't mean to fully break this down to some sort of analytical equation because I'm more of an eye test type of guy anyways, but this leaves around 11 shots per game open for guys like Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, and Jayson Tatum to come into. Speaking of the eye test, once again, Tatum's got practically all bases covered. He's a very shifty player with a smooth jump shot, a quick first step, and is athletically gifted enough to throw down on defenders' heads pretty often. The top reason I could think of for Tatum not taking that big time jump into true stardom last season is surely enough just Kyrie Irving. Not to say that it's just solely Irving's fault for Tatum's percentages dropping slightly, but I personally feel that's simply enough if Tatum had the opportunity to lead the Boston team rather than being a part of a supporting cast. He would have taken off last season after that impressive 2018 postseason of his, which was fully without Kyrie Irving. Even with Kemba Walker on the team, now the 21-year-old Tatum is bound to have more opportunities, and I personally think he'll emerge as a true leader of this team at some point in the season. And I firmly believe that he's going to be one of the best players in the league for many, many, many years to come. That's all I've got though. You can do all this stuff like liking the video and subscribing if you enjoyed and want to see some more content. And I'm out. Cut.